The morning sun broke through the grey clouds over the wide, empty plains as Samuel Carter rode slowly toward the north pasture. His horse's hooves pressed into the damp earth, still wet from the storm that had raged all night. Samuel was a man of few words, a rancher who had spent too many years alone, his only company the wind, the cattle, and the ghosts of his past. As he rode, he noticed the silence. No birds, no coyotes, not even the familiar hum of morning life. Then from somewhere ahead came a faint creak, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Samuel pulled on the reins, listening. The noise came again, soft but rhythmic, like wood groaning under weight. He turned his horse toward a cluster of cottonwood trees near the dry creek bed. As he drew closer, his chest tightened. Hanging from one of the low branches was a figure, a young girl, limp and lifeless looking, her brown skin bruised, her dark hair tangled with leaves. A wooden sign hung around her neck, swinging in the breeze. The words burned into it read, "White man don't forgive." Samuel's breath caught. For a moment he couldn't move. The sight brought back flashes from years ago, burning camps, screaming women, soldiers with rifles. He dismounted quickly, heart pounding, and ran to her. When he cut the rope, she collapsed into his arms, light as a bundle of sticks. He saw then that she wasn't dead. Her chest moved, shallow but steady. Her wrists were raw, the skin torn and bleeding. He touched her forehead, it burned with fever. He looked around the empty land. Whoever had done this was long gone. But they'd meant for her to die slowly, to suffer alone. Samuel lifted her onto his horse, covering her with his coat. As he rode back toward his ranch, the words on the sign haunted him. "White man don't forgive." They were a warning, a curse, maybe even a truth. He had been part of that world once, the kind that brought pain to her people. That night, as rain returned and thunder rolled in the distance, Samuel laid the girl on his bed and cleaned her wounds. She stirred, whispering weakly in a language he couldn't understand. He sat beside her, staring into the dim firelight, wondering what kind of men could hang a child and leave her to die. Outside, the wind howled against the old wooden walls, carrying the faint echo of the sign's message into the lonely heart of the ranch. The morning light crept through the cracks in the cabin walls, falling softly across the girl's face. Samuel sat beside her, half asleep in the chair he hadn't left all night. When she stirred, he straightened, watching her eyes flutter open. They were dark, sharp, and filled with fear. She flinched when she saw him, pulling the blanket to her chin, whispering something in Apache, words he couldn't understand. Samuel raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. "You're safe here." But the word safe meant nothing to her. Her eyes darted to the door, to the window, searching for a way out. Samuel fetched a bowl of broth and set it near her. She watched his every move like a wild animal cornered. When he stepped back, she hesitated, then lifted the bowl with trembling hands. Her lips barely touched the spoon, but it was enough. She was alive and she wanted to live. As she ate, Samuel studied her quietly. Her wrists were covered in rope burns, her hair tangled with mud and blood. He wondered how long she had been hanging there before he found her. Later that day, she tried to speak again, pointing to herself and saying something soft. It sounded like Naya. Samuel repeated it, and she nodded, a flicker of trust in her eyes. He finally had her name. But when her gaze landed on the wooden cross hanging above the door, she recoiled as if struck. Her face twisted with terror, and she began to cry, whispering something over and over. Samuel took the cross down and set it aside, realizing too late what it meant to her. He knew that fear. It wasn't just the cross, it was what it represented. Men with crosses on their flags and guns in their hands had burned her village. Samuel had been a soldier once, part of the wars that took everything from her people. He told himself he was following orders, But now, looking at Naya, he saw those same orders through her eyes. Guilt rose in his chest like smoke. As the sun dipped behind the hills, he stepped outside to clear his mind. That's when he noticed the tracks, fresh horseprints near the edge of his property. Someone had been there watching. His hand tightened on his rifle. The men who left her to die might come back to finish what they started. He looked toward the cabin's flickering light and made a silent vow. If they came, they'd have to go through him first. The night was quiet, too quiet for Samuel's liking. The coyotes that usually howled across the plains were silent, and even the horses in the corral seemed restless. A cold wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of smoke, not from his fire, but from somewhere beyond the ridge. Samuel's instincts sharpened. He set his coffee down and reached for his rifle, stepping out into the darkness. In the faint moonlight, he saw the outline of movement beyond the fence, shadows shifting, torches flickering. His stomach tightened. They had found her. Inside the cabin, Naya sensed something was wrong. She stood by the window, her eyes wide and full of fear. Samuel motioned for her to stay low. "Don't move," he whispered, loading his rifle. The sound of horses drew closer, followed by rough laughter and the crunch of boots. Then came a voice, loud and taunting. "Carter, we know she's in there! That Apache witch ain't worth dying for. Hand her over and we'll leave you be." Samuel felt a rush of anger, old and familiar. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle raised, his shadow stretching long in the torchlight. "You boys best turn around," he called. His voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "Ain't no witch here, only a man defending his land." A shot cracked the silence, the bullet splintering wood inches from his head. Samuel ducked and fired back, hitting the dirt near the men's horses. Chaos erupted. Bullets whistled through the dark as torches flew, setting the barn ablaze. The orange glow spread fast, lighting the faces of the attackers, men he recognized from the nearby town. The same men who once shared drinks with him now came to kill. Inside, Naya crouched by the table, trembling, clutching the small wooden cross Samuel had taken down. When the flames roared outside, she closed her eyes and began to whisper in her language, a soft chant like a prayer carried by the wind. Samuel fought on, his rifle blazing until the last round was spent. The men finally retreated into the night, cursing his name, vowing to return. As the fire died and the dawn crept over the hills, Samuel walked among the ashes of his barn, the smell of smoke heavy in the air. Naya stepped outside, her face streaked with tears. She looked at the ruin, then at him. In her eyes there was sorrow, but also something deeper, gratitude. For the first time since he'd found her, Samuel saw a faint spark of trust. He knew then he'd done the right thing, no matter what it might cost him. The days that followed were calmer, though the scent of burnt wood still lingered around the ranch. Samuel rebuilt what he could, his hands rough and blistered, while Naya moved quietly beside him, helping in small ways. She fed the horses, fetched water from the creek, and sometimes hummed soft songs under her breath, songs that carried a sorrow Samuel didn't have words for. Slowly, their silence turned into understanding. When she spoke, he listened. When he pointed, she followed. It wasn't friendship yet, but something fragile was growing between them, like green shoots pushing through dry soil. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mesas, Samuel sat with Naya by the corral. He taught her a few English words, pointing at things: the sky, horse, water. She repeated them carefully, her accent soft and musical. In return, she taught him a few Apache words. He stumbled through them, earning a quiet smile from her, the first he had ever seen. For a moment the air felt lighter, as though the world had stopped holding its breath. But peace on the plains never lasted long. Word had spread in the nearby town of Dry Creek. The rancher who'd once fought Apache wars was now sheltering one under his roof. Some folks called it madness, others called it treason. When a wagon rolled up one afternoon, Samuel recognized the men before they even spoke. Old army friends. Men he'd fought beside years ago. They stood by their horses, faces grim. "We heard talk," one of them said. "You got yourself some kind of Indian girl here." "That true?" Samuel didn't answer right away. "She's got a name," he said finally, his voice even. "Naya," the man spat in the dirt. "You've gone soft, Sam. If the army finds out, they'll hang you for aiding the enemy. You remember what those people did to our boys?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "And I remember what we did to theirs." Men looked at him like he'd grown horns. After a tense moment, they rode off, leaving dust and warning behind. That night, the weight of it pressed heavy on Samuel's chest. He knew the danger wasn't over, not for him, not for Naya, yet when he looked at her tending the small fire, her face lit by its glow, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a reason to stand his ground. Still, Naya's eyes held a shadow he couldn't name. When she slept, she murmured in her tongue, reliving something awful. And one night, through broken words and tears, Samuel finally understood. She had seen the man who destroyed her village, the sheriff of Dry Creek. The sun was high over Dry Creek when Samuel rode into town with Naya beside him. She sat stiffly on the saddle, her eyes darting between the buildings, the faces, the noise. It had been months since she'd been near this much of the world, and every sound seemed to pull her closer to the past she'd tried to forget. Samuel guided his horse slowly, keeping close to her. They needed supplies, flour, medicine, nails, but he also wanted the town to see her as a person, not a ghost from a war they refused to let go. As they stopped outside the general store, Naya froze. Her breathing quickened, her hands trembling. Samuel turned to her, concern in his voice. "What is it?" She didn't answer, just stared across the street. Following her gaze, Samuel saw the man she was looking at, Sheriff Cole, leaning against a post, laughing with two deputies. His badge glinted in the sun, and the sight of it made Naya's lips part in silent horror. She whispered a single word that Samuel didn't know, but the look in her eyes said everything. That was him. Cole noticed her then, his smile fading. Their eyes met for only a second before Samuel placed a hand on Naya's shoulder. "Let's go," he said quietly. They rode out of town without another word. Back at the ranch, Naya wouldn't eat or speak. When night fell, she sat by the fire and finally began to talk, her voice breaking as she spoke in fragments. Through gestures and scattered English, Samuel pieced it together, the burning of her village, the screams, the gunfire, and the face of the man who had led it all, Cole. Samuel sat in silence long after she finished, the crackle of the fire filling the space between them. He remembered Cole, too, the war hero, the man who had once saved his life in battle. It seemed impossible that the same man could have done what Naya described. But deep down, Samuel knew it was true. The wars had turned good men into monsters. The next morning, Samuel saddled his horse before dawn. Naya woke as he tightened the reins. "No," she whispered, grabbing his arm, her eyes wide with fear. He looked at her, his voice low but firm. "It has to end, Naya." He rode into Dry Creek as the town still slept, the rising sun casting long shadows down the street. When Cole stepped out of the saloon, surprise flickered across his face. Samuel didn't wait for words. The truth came with fire and thunder.